when you started out, you were really focused on crowdfunding and like word of mouth through family and friends to drive sales. Is that right?
Yes, and especially the first like 3 years, it was truly like the core family and friends and like people surrounding area in Jackson. Like that's building off of that. And then crowdfunding came into the picture, 3.5 years into after we started.
And where did the journey of the concept of the product or the overall business start?
It's a great story. So I grew up in Ohio, but I've spent a lot of time in Northern Ontario since I was little. And in this small town, they say giver all the time. You give it your all, go for it, get after it. Very energetic and kind of all-encompassing term. Something I fell in love with this area in the Great Lakes. I always wanted to share it with more family and friends. And so a vision I had from when I was younger was like a kayaking or canoe trip, kind of an expedition, if you will. That became an annual trip starting off around 2008. And doing that trip every year with 3 to 12 people, family and friends. On the 5th annual trip, it happened to be myself and 4 friends that were living here in Jackson, and as a commemorative item or something to appreciate all the effort that goes into the trip and the people, made a hat that had giver on it that they were going to be exposed to, and then the Tetons, which is our home mountain range. So I gave everyone the hats, and we had an awesome trip, and people wore the hats, myself included, after the trip. And I would get stopped on the street. I had family and friends asking, like, "Hey, I saw pictures of that hat. Did you make more? I want one." And that was kind of the impetus for, okay, maybe there's something here, because it was very like, I rarely have people stop me for any reason, let alone because of something I'm wearing. But it was like a very, hey, I'll give you $20 now if you make a hat for me at some point. And so that kind of, I guess, interest grew and grew to the point where I was like, okay, there's something here. Let's try to do hats and T-shirts and see if there's enough traction here and interest, and then kind of build the supporting ethos and what is it that giver means to a team or a community, or to to the people who are just interested and they want a hat of their own.
Yeah, and so you started with the family and friends and then went into crowdfunding. Did you find early on in the crowdfunding that it was focused on people in that proximity area, or were you doing like online, like I can't think of the website, but online campaigns?
I would say what was neat about our process is we had a core community that was excited to go to bat for us and support us with whatever, the products and the things we had done up to that point. They're like, hey, just let us know how to support you because we love what you're doing. And so we had a core group community that then was ready to go to bat for something like a Kickstarter, even though it was a new platform or a new format for us to launch a product. But we worked hard to establish, hey, why would we go to Kickstarter? What is the reason for this? And telling that story on the platform was, it was aligned with why our community loved us or were supportive of us up till then. And also gave a chance to reach out to a wider audience that was all over the country, as well as I think we ended up shipping to like 32 different countries for that first campaign. So a little bit of it's like, if you build it, they will come, but a tremendous amount of work to, empower our community, as well as learning, hey, how do you get the word out to people on something like Kickstarter, and working with partners who had a much better understanding of it than we did, in order to, it's not just, put it on the website and next thing you know, people want to support you. But working with Launchboom is the name of the company. They were incredibly supportive and helpful. And so the ingredients that we had core community that were really stoked and ready to support us, in addition to a product that was, had just enough, it had history and authenticity of how we developed it, as well as visuals and a story that all the dots connected. Those came together to be a pretty significant campaign.
And I think it's pretty interesting, now that you mentioned it was like a local phrase or just like a local,
Colloquial term.
yeah, taking that and turning that into not just a national brand, but you said you shipped it to 30 plus countries. Is that
Is it?
right?
Is it?
Did you notice you had to, you know, pivot or just kind of like be strategic on how you communicated that local term or that thing, or was it able to just expand as it was? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's been an interesting kind of dance that the original reason for people being interested was the term and the look of the logo, that it was striking enough. And the product, especially the 4-season gloves that we launched the first Kickstarter with, it was less of like, hey, here's the term, and then we happen to have this product, and we kind of led with the product. And the cool part is like it all is in the same bucket of like doing these things that you'd love to do adventure wise or utilitarian, kind of dealing with snow, dealing with crazy elements and weather, choosing to give it your all, go for it, get after it. It's like they all kind of flow into each other. So yet it has been a dance of like, hey, what's in Spanish, what is an equivalent term, or in Chinese, what's the equivalent term, and connecting the dots over time with like, hey, this is kind of what this term means in your local language. So it's been fun.
Yeah, but I guess with, the community building, because I know that's a big part of your brand, is the culture or the lifestyle still resonates regardless of the physical words that we use as vehicles to transport it in. I know you shared on our last chat that community has been one of the primary drivers for the brand. What does community building look like to you? Because everybody talks about community building and how they want to go after it, but some brands can struggle to build community like you have.
Totally. And I think it's a combination of being realistic and being patient and not committing to timelines or numbers that are really easy to get distracted by. And the way I've kind of always shared it with our team is like, let's deliver or over deliver to the core community that we do have, because there's nothing more powerful than the word of mouth, like a friend of yours saying, hey, these gloves are sweet, or maybe not even a friend, but like I'm sitting on a chairlift with a total stranger and I'm excited to share why these gloves are awesome. And so while it can be the shininess of like, oh, let's have 10,000 followers, or let's increase our let's double or triple how many orders we send out. It is a focus on delivering and listening to who those loyal fans are, and recognizing that there's a bandwidth of their patience and flexibility as true fans, and they want to be engaged and they want to be a part of it. So by leaning back in on those folks and making sure that we are delivering and improving and communicating that, not to take that for granted and be shooting for much greater numbers, but being patient to ensure that the value is being delivered to that community.
And you're focusing more on in-person events when you're doing community building, or do you have like a digital element to it? Because sometimes when you hear about community, you think of Facebook groups or Slack channels or whatever it may be.
Mm-hmm. And that's what's been I've used the term dance before, but it is a dance of local community and like in-person events, as well as the super fan from Columbus, Ohio, where I'm originally from, or from Seattle, Washington, who just loves the product and like wants to shout from the mountaintop how great they are. it's been a fun balance to say, how do we retain our local roots and continue to build on that, supporting local organizations, being present at, whether it be concerts, festivals, big snow events, but then also, okay, how do we engage those and build on the, call it, digital community, and then trying to have them overlap as much as possible. There's a lot of trial and error, because like it would be great to be a part of every mountain town's big events and to have a van or a big booth set up, but it's balancing that with realistic timelines and efforts that, like, hey, we can't be everywhere at once, but let's do really good or really well the things we are committed to, and then slowly but surely add to that and try things out. It parallels with our product development life cycle of like, hey, it'd be neat to just snap your fingers and have this beautiful new product, but we can't. But what we can do is test things out, put together a Frankenstein prototype, test things out with the next prototype, and evolve, with our own use cases, to be able to say, okay, this product passes the test for what we do around here. And we've also done some extreme things. It might take 2 years to develop that product, but man, the stuff we've learned in that process and the credibility and the language we can use in sharing with our customers, like, hey, this didn't just happen overnight, and yet we're very confident in what features, benefits, and the thought that's gone into each product.
And just kind of, and I appreciate you sharing all that. And going back into where you said, like, how can this overlap and how can we develop this out? Do you have any sort of like mapping or strategy or planning that you do on where you're doing in-person events or what in-person events you're going to or sponsoring, to see how things like that can, kind of combine over time?
Mm-hmm. I think it's, again, it kind of, well, the filtering process is like, all right, what type of events and or interactions are most accessible? So like, oh, I want to go to the biggest outdoor retailer show in the country, is like, that's where all the action is. It's like, okay, well, that's not possible. Where can you start? Whether it's a local people's market, it's an art fair, the things that are, okay, the least amount of friction to give a try. And there's, sometimes you show up and there's just not a lot of people there, or it's not as well marketed, but every event gives you an opportunity to have face-to-face. And a lot of times it's like, okay, what's the bigger picture? Hey, this worked really well. What elements of this can we look to other places to repeat? And yeah, having a little grace of like, okay, that took a lot of time and a lot of energy, and the results weren't what we were desiring, yet there's always something you can learn from it. And so I guess having goals and being intentional about what you say yes to, or I guess that you say hell yes to, oftentimes you have to say no to a lot of other things. And it's more of a progression over a longer period of time versus that exact event or that one time frame. Like, did we do good or did we fail? That it's more of a longer term timeline.
Yeah. Yeah. So sort of looking at it like a brand building type aspect. It's not
Totally.
just like a direct one for one cost revenue comparison, if you will.
And yet that's the hard part, wearing two different hats, is like, okay, you do have to have an understanding of costs and of what revenue is generated. Like, the numbers have to add up, and some mistakes or learning opportunities can be pretty expensive. But I think the way that we continually look at things is like, that expensive mistake is a huge learning opportunity. What is learned or taken away from those depends on the circumstances. But again, by learning from whatever trial and error or testing out, you just use that as forward momentum to make wiser decisions and or ensure that the team all can learn from that example.
Yeah, and I think from our first conversation, the thing that I walked away with that just blew my mind completely when you shared it about community building is how you said you look at it like Venn diagrams and you see how, if we do events in this city and this state, how can we build out some, I'll just use the term raving fans, but like some core supporters there. And then if we look at planting seed at another event or, city, opportunity to build more fans there, like how can eventually those two efforts overlap so that communication and word of mouth is starting to trickle from both, which
Mhm.
just blew my mind to see that visually like that.
For sure. And that's what's it's real easy when breaking down like, hey, what's the key demographic for your customer? Like where do they live? And what's great about, our brand and, giving it your all, go for it, get after it, pursue your passion, that there's a lot of mobility associated with that. Meaning, someone who lives in Chicago who goes skiing in Jackson, Wyoming, or in Colorado, that there end up being these patterns, or I guess similarities of those different demographics. So like, yeah, they might be based in Chicago or in Los Angeles, but they love to go on these types of adventures, and so there starts to be overlap, even though if you're really getting nitty and gritty about it, like their home base is in a different location. But the mentality and connection to our mission and what we're all about, finding ways to overlap those different groups, and then finding ways to connect with them, whether it be on those trips or in preparation for that adventure, or as they gear up and bring their friends to go on these types of trips, and kind of encourage that. The only thing better than doing it yourself is encouraging and sharing it with others.
Well, it sounds like you all have done very good at, A, creating product that elicits word of mouth, but B, building that community to drive growth. What are some of the biggest opportunities or challenges you feel like you're having in 2023 with the brand, like with the growth ahead of you?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think all would agree that as far as like what's the economic landscape look like? There's been a lot of like question marks and I don't knows and sensationalizing of inflation or recession, and so that, I guess you'd call it, uncertainty or instability is is prevalent across the board, and there are a lot of things that, okay, we can't impact the Fed rate. We can't impact whether people are feeling a big crunch in their spending. But I think listening to, finding ways to get feedback and input from people, our customers and our community, it's hard to, hey, everyone share your opinions. There's going to be a lot of differences or what each person's feeling, but I think keeping a pulse on that as best we can, and adjusting to what is just a time of a lot of uncertainty, and then being nimble and having our products or our marketing efforts kind of I guess be receptive to all that we learn from our community, versus being deaf to it and saying, well, regardless of what's happening here, we're still going to execute this plan that was based on thoughts from a year ago. It does necessitate being more nimble and, again, saying no to certain things so that we can say yes to the pieces that are most in connection with our community and that we're capable of delivering on.
Yeah, getting that customer insight and then having data or actionable data from it can be a tough one, and it's a good opportunity for all businesses. Are you all currently using like any sort of post-purchase survey or any sort of like Shopify apps or tools or anything like that to try to garner that?
Yes, a variety of tools. And I think I can appreciate the difficulty of like, man, there's so many different ways in which, or services or apps that allow you to do that, that you can almost get bogged down and just try to choose the one that that's going to serve your needs. And then the moment you choose that, there's another one that like does it better. And so I think the kind of way we've operated is, okay, use the tools that we have the most experience with and that we have reliable input coming our direction. But then in lieu of getting too caught up in all those different avenues and paths, the simple ability to talk to someone on the phone or interact with them in person, to me, that it complements and validates and or helps provide direction for what resources or tools we're using, whether it be through reviews or Zendesk or kind of post-purchase surveys. It's like, okay, we can never let go of the ability to just have that face-to-face conversation with somebody, or over the phone. It's like, it's real easy to, an example would be, someone, customer places an order, there's something that gets mixed up. Like, it's easy to go back and forth with 20 emails, or it's easy to get, use the software and the tools. But man, more often than not, just getting someone on the phone, showing our humanness of like, yes, we are based out of Jackson, Wyoming, and your order was supposed to arrive in New York on Wednesday, but it's going to arrive Thursday. We're not driving the UPS or FedEx truck. So like, what can we do? And just like reasoning with people, find that 99% of the time, it's like, oh, okay, this is there's a human on the other end of this. And while we can't, we don't have a private jet to be able to fly in the order, let's find the most reasonable solution. And so I think that the ability to communicate with customers and like kind of level with them, is really impactful.
Yeah, and that community service piece it's brand building. It's adds to lifetime value. It builds community. I mean, it is marketing. Like, it helps push everything that way. Do you find yourself making calls to just connect with customers just like out of the blue? Have you ever done calls and what does that go like? I guess the question I'm trying to get to is like, on a scale of 1 out of 10, 9 out of 10, like, how many customers do you feel are just open to that? Do you ever feel like they're kind of unsure of who's calling? Like, how comfortable is that situation?
It can vary, I mean, across the board. But I think your point, or the question of like, hey, do you ever just reach out, not when something's wrong, but just to connect with people? We do. And I would say a lot of that occurs naturally through, events and or just being present in the community, of like bumping into someone at the grocery store and they're like, hey, dude, those gloves are kicking ass. It's been a rough winter. I've had to do 3 times the amount of shoveling. Like those kind of, I would say, organic opportunities to connect with people are very helpful. And I think a big piece is, even if we can't call every customer and talk to them, it's providing clear communication of like, hey, when it comes to November and December, our ability to like do intricate adjustments to orders or requests, like, we're slammed. So if you have questions, like September, October are a great time in which for us to help serve you. And so it's kind of leading and being transparent with what expectations are. And I think over time, especially year after year, and our raving fans, core community, they understand that, and it does take time to kind of build that and establish, reinforce that communication. So it's not something that can happen just overnight. But then being receptive to whether it be really positive of like, hey, I just want to tell someone about how much I love these gloves, or like, hey, this is how I was really disappointed. It's like, all feedback is good feedback. And especially when it comes to like product development. And I always say to people, hey, we try the craziest things we can think of to test these products out. But like, I can't tap into a lumber mill and work there for 2 weeks to find out how that works, or I can't work in a Navy SEAL training program to know how well they handle on ocean water or on salt water. But like that feedback is really helpful. So it's truly opening things up to receive the feedback and then be transparent. Like, hey, we can't necessarily solve for every unique desire or use case, but like all those synthesized together, we sure as hell can make a better product.
Yeah, and I see on your site you have you're in retail as well. What
Mhm.
do you see yourself expanding retail, or do you like staying more D2C with things?
That's a great question. Our balance has been mostly direct to consumer, and that has namely hinged upon the customization and personalization that we
Yeah,
do with especially our gloves and mittens. Um, but what has been really cool is over time being able to work with more retail partners who is the best when they're like, hey, I got people coming into the store saying we need to carry Giver gloves. Like, I wasn't sure what Giver gloves are, but I've checked them out and like, we want to carry them. So in that way, the organic expansion of retail operations or partners, it has been a more natural and smooth growth curve, if you will. Um, and versus like, hey, we need to get in 1,000 retailers by next month is like, that's kind of losing sight of, okay, where's the core of our community and how do we grow as a team? But to answer the question more specifically, yes, we are taking on more retail partners and especially identifying, okay, all the people we have worked with who it's been like a very much win-win relationship over the last 12 years. Okay, what can we learn from those to then say, okay, it's likely that this type of retailer or this type of partner will work well and be a win-win for both them and for Giver.
I love it. Yeah, I saw on there you have two locations somewhat near me, one in Charlotte and one in Boone, North Carolina,
Mm-hmm.
that way.
Mm-hmm.
So awesome. Well, we've talked about a good bit of stuff on community building and driving growth overall. If you had to summarize everything we talked about today into a mindset, what would you tell marketers they should take away from this?
I would say the term slow is smooth and smooth is fast. I think I'm getting that right. I might be getting it wrong, but that it can be very easy, especially in today's age, to a new app or a new feature, like chasing after that and then chasing after that, and it becomes just this wild pendulum swings versus again saying no to the things, to many things, to say yes to actually allow you as a company, as a brand, as a marketing group to hypothesis test with, I would say, more conclusive results versus if you're scattered all over the place, is really difficult to know if something's working or not. And I would say a second piece of that, or like a side dish, is and with all the numbers and the metrics that are available, especially with the amount, with social media and the digital side of tracking and attribution, it's really important to have an awareness of those numbers, but to not be so caught up in them that you like lose the forest for the trees. And that's difficult. And depending on what product you're selling or what service you're providing, man, for everyone, it's going to be different. But to not get so caught up in those numbers that you forget that there's a customer, like who that human being is. So I don't know, that's stating the obvious, but I think continuing to be realistic and check with yourselves on how much the numbers are driving things versus the humans that are making the decisions.
I love it. And for anyone listening that's at the stage of figuring out what they'd like to do in the marketing industry, what role or marketing roles do you think will have the highest demand or opportunity in the next 3 to 5 years?
Oh, I mean, truly, those that manage the digital presence or advertising. I think that for sure is going, like, someone who knows the systems. They're always changing. That's the craziest part. It's like from one month to the next, and especially if you look at the past, 3 to 5 years, how much has changed. Someone who kind of lives and breathes that and can provide like honest and genuine support of someone like me or our company who, like, my background isn't in that, and I have sought out and we've had great partners to help us navigate those waters. But I would say those who have a great feel for the digital marketing world and can provide guidance that is, I would say, applicable to companies of all sizes. It's real easy to say, oh, if you have $1 billion, I can help you spend that online, versus, oh, okay, you're a small growing business and like you don't have a never ending budget to be throwing out ads. So here's ways in which I think, provide recommendations and guidance as well as execution on what's out there.
Yeah, I think with agencies, 2015, 2019, it was all about having like a defined service and a system, and that's still very important. But now businesses more and more are needing like custom plans to grow, just as the landscapes are evolving. So, and tell us, where can listeners connect with you and learn more about your business?
You betcha. So on all the social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok as well. It's at Giver JH, GIVER JH, Jackson Hole. Our website has a plethora of not only products and the backgrounds on how they were developed, but that's giver.com, GIVE-R.com. And a lot of fun background on like the products that you get and how they evolve as you use them, how to break them in, as well as the history behind like how we came to deem this a product worthy of making. And it's really, I would definitely recommend, especially those who are interested or considering crowdfunding. We put a lot of energy into our 3 crowdfunding campaigns on Kickstarter and Indiegogo. So check those out. As far as like the format, and man, it's really cool how transparent that whole campaign is, not only from the backers' perspective, but where backers are coming from, our reward tiers, like how we presented things. So on Kickstarter, if you search Giver, you can check those campaigns out for the 4 Season gloves, the Old Faithful midweight pullover, and the Frontier mittens. So yeah, that's can't recommend that enough. And that's not for everybody, but it is has been a really significant driver for our growth and our community building is use of Kickstarter.
I love it. Well, Bubba, I appreciate you coming on the podcast today. This was good and insightful, definitely for community building, but a couple aspects as well. So thanks for coming on.
You bet, Colby. I appreciate it. And look forward to checking out all the, as the marketing world continues to evolve, evolving with it.
Awesome. Thank you.
You bet.